All right, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Spiritual Asshole. I'm so excited to be joined by Hale Dwoskin. He is the best-selling author of the Sedona Method and Happiness is Free. Also, he's prominently featured in Rhonda Byrne's The Greatest Secret. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. So, I watched a video of you recently where you said, "Life has no meaning, it's just this." How long have you been a 13-year-old goth girl?
Actually, they're 13-year-old goth girls think everything is meaningful.
That's actually a great point. You're right, totally.
You know, how everyone around them looks, how they look to them, how many likes they have, how many followers they have. I mean, the list is endless.
You're right. Actually, they probably care the most. That's a great point. I did love this quote though. I cut your quote off. You went on to say then we're basically boundless beings. So, do you feel like you came to this place through all the releasing you've done?
Yes. Well, yes and no. This it doesn't feel like a place. It feels
Mm.
placeless and timeless. But this, I certainly did a lot of releasing. I've been involved in the Sedona Method and releasing since 1976.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of releasing on you name the topic. I've done releasing on it. And again, I've been working with people since 1977
Mm.
using this process. So
Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into it. You did create the Sedona method. Are you familiar with the Staten Island method where you just throw yourself in the East River?
that sounds dangerous. No, I'm not. I'm from originally from Brooklyn.
Yeah, I saw that you were in the Upper East Side for a while, and it's kind of where you were really practicing the Sedona method, right?
Yeah, I lived on Central Park West, right off of Central Park West, which
Nice.
is
Okay.
actually the Upper West Side. But who's counting? Yeah, but I grew up. I was born in Brooklyn and grew up until I was how old was I when I moved to Manhattan? In my early 20s, I moved to Manhattan.
Yeah. And if you can release in Manhattan, I lived there for 12 years, you can release anywhere. That's what I say.
I think that's accurate. The Manhattan. And when I first moved to the Upper West Side, there were still burned out buildings. This is 1977, I think it was.
Mm.
There were still burnouts and stuff like that, not far from where I was living. I was living in a walk-up, but it was a beautiful location. It was just a few houses off of Central Park's West, and so I had the access to the park, and it's gorgeous. And the Upper West Side has always had wonderful things like Zabar's
Oh
and
yeah.
lots of restaurants. It's a fun place. It was a fun place to live.
Yeah, so how did you initially come to Lester Levinson? I know I read that you were a seeker or you were seeking different things and I'm on a very similar path and have been. So how did you get to that place?
Well, I actually organized a seminar for a man named Leonard Orr, the guy who started Theta Seminars Rebirthing.
Cool.
And Lester came as his guest to one of the seminars. It was a one-year seminar, met once a month for a year. And Lester just came as a guest and didn't even notice him in the seminar because he was pretty unassuming.
Mm.
But I went out to lunch with Lester and Leonard and my co-organizer of the seminar. And just being with Lester, he was palpably different than any teacher from the East or West I had met before. And he also didn't consider himself a teacher. He was just talking about releasing and letting go and truth. And I found it very, it was hard to say. I just felt this peace and this calm and this love just being with him at lunch. So I asked him what he did, and he said, "You sit around the table and release." And I had no idea what that was. This is 77. Releasing back then for most people was beating pillows.
Oh, it still is for me. Smashing my car. Yeah, it's great.
Poor pillow.
Still is for me, man.
But anyway, so when I heard that, I didn't even know what it was, but I thought if I could get just a tiny bit of what he was oozing or living, I thought I should check it out. And there was a course starting the next weekend. He didn't even teach them. Someone he had trained taught the course. And before the course was even over, what I noticed is this things were shifting very rapidly, and I was starting already to feel some of the peace that he was exuding. So, and I also had this, I was 22 years old, and I had this recognition, oh, so this is what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life.
Mm. And we should talk about how much this method completely changed Lester Levinson's life. I mean, I was literally just listening to The Greatest Secret on audio, and his story is incredible.
Yes, oh, his story is incredible. But basically, the doctors sent him home to die, and uh, he moped around his house feeling suicidal for a few days. He had just had a second coronary. At least he thought he did. Back then, wasn't that exact. But anyway, and then after a few days, he said, "Lester, for a smart boy, you are stupid, stupid, stupid." He said that to himself. And then he decided to go back to the way within himself. He didn't had never studied any spirituality or anything like that. Wasn't into it. He had studied psychology, engineering, and besides psychology, those are the main two things he studied. But he was very knowledgeable in those two fields, and just in life. He was a successful entrepreneur, and uh, and he started spontaneously. He didn't even know what he was doing. He started a process of self-inquiry, like, what is this world? What's my relationship to it? What's this all about? And the first thing he hit on is that, and he asked himself, well, what have I been looking for? And he realized that the main thing he wanted was happiness.
Mm.
And and then he examined when he was the happiest, and he realized that the times he was the happiest is when he was loving. Not when he was being loved, but when he was loving. And that was the first of a series of realizations that ended up freeing him of his heart issues and diverticulitis and migraines and perforated ulcers and jaundice a few times a year. He had even had, uh, I don't know how long he was in therapy, but he went to psychotherapy. And the the therapist, after working with him for a while, said, "Lester, some people just can't be helped." He got fired.
Basically, I think it's fair to say he was doing the Staten Island method. That's what was
Yeah, it
happening.
probably was. Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't working well for him.
Yeah. So, okay. So basically, then he discovered, and then you kind of gleaned this and took this even farther, that there are all these emotions stuck that we've trapped in our bodies, and they
Yes.
just kind of live there. And you use this great pen analogy with Jack Canfield that I love. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Let me just finish one thought
Oh, yeah,
about
absolutely.
Lester.
Absolutely.
No, 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 it's totally okay. Uh, so, um, so anyway, so Lester then basically his body healed, and he spent the rest of the 42 years of his life, even though the doctors gave him only weeks to live, trying to help what he saw as the rest of him discover what he had discovered.
Yeah.
And he was a living embodiment of it.
Mm.
And by the time I met him, it had been over 20 years he'd been doing it. And I got involved with him, uh, and realized that working with him is really what I wanted to do. Now, I was pretty young at 22, so I worked with him a little bit, and then I needed to go out and live my life for a while. And then in '87, I moved from New York to Phoenix. That's where his organization was headquartered, and worked for him for a bunch of years for free because I'd gotten so much from the work. And then before he died, he passed all his copyrights to me and
Wow.
asked me if I would continue the work. And after that, the method continued to evolve. He said it would, and it did. And it developed into a whole do-it-yourself system that is called the Sedona Method. And
Mm.
as you mentioned, Jack, and about half the movie The Secret that I was in with Jack and uh, John Gray and Marcy Shimoff and a bunch of other law of attraction teachers. Um, I only had a small role in the movie because uh, Rhonda, when she interviewed me, was already very familiar with Wester. So the main thing we talked about is releasing. And towards the very end of the thing, oh yeah, this first movie is going to be about the law of attraction. So you need to give me a quote. So I gave her the quote: "Be for what you want instead of against what you don't want." And
Mm.
she built a whole segment of that film and book around that. But I think, had two very short pieces of the movie because at the time, even though we do help people manifest what they want, we never called it the law of attraction, nor did Lester. But when she got one of the places she heard about the law of attraction that she uh, is from Lester. There was a book of Lester's teaching called Keys to the Ultimate Freedom. It's now called
Mhm.
Happiness is Free. And she had it on her bedstand, I think she told me, since the early 90s, the late 80s. It must have been the early 90s, yes. And so that also part of what inspired The Secret.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I'm just thinking about this now is like that whole, that whole movement's about attracting things to you, and you guys are teaching basically to release things, to have things come.
Yes.
So is it because by doing that, then you become more magnetic for the things that you want? Is that what happens?
Well, yes and no. The Sedona method is based on the premise that that which you truly are, or that which truly is already unlimited, is the all.
Mm.
And that includes abundance, that includes goodness, that includes all the good things that life has to offer. That's already what's natural. And the only reason we don't experience it is because we're very identified with our story and our body and with our emotions. There's nothing wrong with emotions. Emotions are just energy in motion. They come, they have their moment in in the light, and then they subside. But for most of us, because we have all these stories about why we feel the way we do, and because we resist the emotions, they tend to run our lives. They push us around. They tell us what we can and cannot do. And what the Sedona method does is it frees you to have or not have any emotion. It doesn't try to get rid of all emotion because I think that would be boring. But it does free you to have any emotion, like be angry when it's appropriate or sad when it's appropriate, but also frees you to let go of any emotion that seems to be holding you back. And because basically emotion or feeling and thoughts are just that. They're not really who you are.
Mm.
And they because they're not who you are, they can be dissolved or let go of or shed.
So we can't just yell at call center reps. That's not the move.
Well, it's a great move, but not for the call center reps. and I'm, and I'm sure you've noticed that when you yell at someone or you express anger in any kind of destructive ways, it might temporarily feel better, but generally it feels crappy afterwards.
Absolutely. And then
And
you think about it and then you like ruminate about you're like, I shouldn't have done that.
right, exactly. But also, one of the things I've found that is, if you yell and scream at someone, they're much less likely to do what you want.
Yes, that's such a good point. That's such a good point, man. That's
Yeah,
like that famous negotiator talks about that. Like if you really want with something, you have to talk slowly and quietly and never forcefully. And I was like, oh, that's amazing.
yeah. But it's really not how you talk, because you can talk slowly and quietly and drive people crazy. But but if you push someone for what you want, when someone pushes you to do something, what's your immediate inner reaction?
Push back or step back.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So good negotiators find a way to find mutuality so that it's a win-win situation. Everybody is getting something. And a really good one actually makes the harmonious solution something that the apparent opposing party thinks of. That helps them come to the same conclusion. And it's really good negotiators are not manipulators, because you can feel when you're being manipulated.
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely.
really can feel that.
Yeah.
So this and the way that releasing affects that is, as you let go, you're less tight. You know how we have this sense of contraction that's usually in us when we're awake. It's part of the reason we like sleep so much, is if you have a sound sleep, you get a relief from all, not just all the problems and issues you're dealing with and all the thinking, but also just the tension there is of just managing life moment to moment. Well, that tension can drop away. It can be released. And then it almost feels like you're being lived, or life is living you, or life is just this flowing alive happening, as opposed to a drama and a trauma and all about winning and losing. And every person you meet, you're evaluating whether or not you can get something from them or they're a threat.
You just described LA, bro. You just described LA.
Well,
Hollywood.
yeah, well, but it's not just in Hollywood. It's human beings in general, not from maliciousness,
Right.
but from this sense of I'm in here and there's a limited amount of resources out there that I'm competing with everyone else for, and you never know when someone's going to be a threat. They
Mm.
either agree with you or they don't. They either have something you want, or you have something they want, and so it's a constant push pull or negotiation. And life isn't a negotiation; it's just life.
Mm. Man, I feel great. Okay, so I think it'd be beneficial. Can you talk about like actual things that you started doing with this method and the changes you saw so we can get into some specifics for the people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the pen analogy. That's a good
Yeah,
place to start.
it's so good. Yeah.
So so those of you listening to this, is this just audio or is it audio and video?
We'll do both. Yeah.
Okay, so whether you're listening or watching, it doesn't matter. But pick up an object. I'm going to hold a pen, but I just happen to have it on my desk here. You can do a coin. It really doesn't matter what it is. And just hold it in your hand for a second. Now, for the sake of this analogy, the pen represents all the sense of contraction and limitation that we carry. The limiting thoughts, the limiting feelings, the limiting beliefs, the painful memories, all the stuff that we are not happy with usually. And our hand represents our gut, or our awareness. And uh, take the object and grip it really tightly. Now, if you did this long enough, it would start to feel really uncomfortable, but also really familiar, because this is what we do with all that without realizing it. It's reflexive. Now, that's enough gripping. Open your hand and roll the object around in your hand. Now, is this object attached to your hand? No, obviously not. But the way it's even in our language, we feel like we are our suffering.
Oh, that's so good.
And but our the suffering that we experience is attached to us as this pen is attached to your hand. So now close your hand lightly around the pen, turn your hand upside down, and then just let it go. That's what we mean by letting go. It's really that simple. We tend to overcomplicate it, but it doesn't have to be that that doesn't have to be complicated. And what we can do, if you'd like, I can do, there are many ways of letting go. It's a whole tool chest. But one of the most simple is just deciding to drop it. And one of the techniques is just a series of a few questions that that can help you get in touch with that natural ability to let go. And one of the things, after you start to use the Sedona method, you find at first it may seem odd because most of us are doing this with our emotions, pushing them down,
And
or
holding our
withdraw.
breath, yeah.
Right, exactly. Or pushing our way through life,
Yeah.
or just throwing them at people
Hmm.
or at life. But once you learn you can let go, it becomes second nature. And
Hmm.
then it's always more, it becomes more and more of a choice in life to either struggle or not, to suffer or not. And again, it's not about not having emotion because there's nothing wrong with it,
Yeah.
but it is a way to be freer with our thoughts and feelings. So we're not bound to them and by them.
Yeah, I
So,
would I would love to hear the questions, and then just quickly, I also want to hear what do you say to those people that are like, it can't be this easy?
well, don't believe me. Try. So we'll I'll give you the questions, and then I'll just take a couple of minutes and just take us through it experientially. And it, all I say when I do that, just be open as possible to it being as easy as I say it is. And and each time you do it, it gets a little easier. So these questions are designed so you can easily do it on your own. And if you practice it a little on your own, at first you might not feel much of anything, but pretty quickly you'll start to feel relief from this.
Mm.
And we've got testimonials. When we first, you mentioned Jack Canfield earlier. Jack is a
Yeah.
friend of mine. It reminds me I need to call him. But the I used to go to be one of the guest speakers at his seminar, Breakthroughs to Success. And one year he recorded it, the whole seminar, and gave me an excerpt of me speaking and gave me permission to use it. So we used to send that out to people as an introduction to what we do. And all I did is the only piece of the Sedona method I taught is the piece I'm about to teach everyone. And we got testimonials of people letting go of fears and phobias and getting better jobs and improving relationships and having all sorts of health issues clear up just from practicing just this small piece of it.
Mm.
So let's do it now. So let
Okay.
me explain it first, and then we'll just go through it two or three times.
Great.
It's very quick. So the first thing I'll do is just have you think of something that you'd like to feel freer about, or you'd like to have or get rid of.
Mm.
And then the next thing we'll do is just allow ourselves to be present with or notice the thoughts or the feelings that are rising about that. And then the three main questions are, could you let it go? And could you just means, are you capable of it? If you could imagine dropping a pen or an object, or you actually did it with me, then I know you can.
Mm.
The next question is, would you let it go? And would you just means, are you willing to? And if you're ever not sure, or when you're practicing this on your own, just ask yourself, would I rather hold on to this pain or suffering, or would I rather be free and have my goal, whatever it is? And the last question is when. And when is an invitation to decide to do it now. And you might find you let go a little on the could you, a little on the would you and a little on the when, or you might save it up for the when. And you, again, and it might be subtle at first, but if you stay open to it, you will start to see results from it. And again, it's very simple. So there's not a lot to remember.
Yeah, that's great. So what happened with, because I was reading your story when you started doing this, you saw changes
Yes,
pretty
yes.
soon.
Oh, yeah, I really did. First off, I felt like I stopped searching. I felt
Mm.
like that I had found the thing that I was going to be involved in for the rest of my life. So that was a relief. And then the other thing is, I just got this sense of clarity and ease about living. And I was only 22, so I hadn't really experienced a lot of life. A
Yeah.
lot of my challenges actually came after that. But I did clean up some of the traumas from my childhood. I had a brother that was born severely mentally retarded when I was 3, and that changed my whole world.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of living, unknowingly living with that, carrying that around on my shoulders, and that started to drop away. And when that thing happened, my mother was really traumatized, and she went into therapy. So whenever all her insights, she would practice on me. So and it was very well meaning. I mean, it wasn't like she wasn't trying to manipulate me or anything,
Yeah.
but she was getting these insights in therapy, and she thought maybe she could help me because she could see how I had really contracted. I was this very outgoing little baby, and then at 3, this whole traumatic thing happened to the family, and after that, I was pretty contracted, and she didn't like that, and she felt responsible. So I was carrying extra stuff about that, and everyone has stories about why they feel the way they do, but it didn't really matter. What I recognized is I could let that all go, and it started dissolving.
Mm.
And I also went from being kind of a gregarious 3-year-old to being very quiet and introverted. And it was years later that I did this, obviously 22. Uh, but I went from feeling really uncomfortable around people to feeling relaxed and open and at ease. And now I can be in very large groups, and it's like just talking to a friend. There's
Mm.
no tension around it. It's just fun.
So at that time you were asking yourself these questions. Is that what was freeing you up?
Yes,
Yeah.
this and some of the other tools that we don't have time to go into.
Okay, okay, yeah. So what do you think is the number one thing that keeps people stuck? Is it their addiction to their own suffering?
Yeah, well, it's their identification with their own suffering.
Mm.
Again, well, first off, it's the feeling it's my suffering.
Mm.
What if feelings don't actually belong to you? They're just what's an energy that's appearing as anger or as grief or as fear. So when we identify with our story and our emotions, it gets very, very sticky, very, very tight. And we feel more and more like there's nothing we can do about it. And we feel the victim of life. Or we feel like we have to be the victor, but that's a lot of work too.
Yes.
But as you learn to let go, life just, you notice that life just is what's apparently happening in this moment. It's beautiful. And at the same time, there's still challenges, but they don't knock you flat
Mm.
because you're not as identified with them. You're more open at ease. And you also respond more appropriately. I found that the more I let go, I also my sense of humor went up dramatically. I laughed a lot more. But also I found that I was responding more appropriately to life situations.
Mm.
And that's a universal report from people. In fact, everything I just described, not my specific story, but everything else is universal. Now, eventually, it can result in, for many people, more money because you're responding more appropriately and you're more at ease, and there's also more of a sense of being open to your intuition and your clear reason, and that comes in really handy in life. Because the thing that obstructs this is getting lost in the story, so you're responding to what was and what might be, and also getting lost in just the contraction around thoughts and feelings. So when that drops away, it opens everything up. You find universally people find that their relationships get easier, and that often means that you find your perfect someone or you improve your relationships. So you also have the freedom to leave ones that aren't functional. And it really helps you deal more effectively with the challenges of being having a physical existence, all forms, but the body too. Even though it doesn't treat, diagnose, cure, or advise about physical or emotional illness, people have reported that it really helps deal with what the body is going through. And sometimes it can produce miraculous physical changes as well.
So I have an interesting question that just came to me. Do you want anything now? Or do you just let it all happen? Because I think there's such an interesting dichotomy in spirituality and development, self-development world of like, there's like this approach, which seems so much chiller and relaxed. And then there's people like Tony Robbins and Alex Hormozy who are like, break a board over your head. Let's go. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that you can't get things that you want in both approaches. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It, when you flow with the river, it carries you.
Mm.
When you bend with the wind, it doesn't knock you over.
I just like your way. I prefer this way. There's birds
Yeah.
chirping by on your screen. I mean, my God.
Yeah. Actually, I have a Senegal parrot
Oh
in
my
the other
God.
room,
All right, I
and
want a
she
parrot.
and she when she hears me talking, she chirps.
Oh my gosh, that's so
She's
much.
participating in the conversation.
Oh, dude, she's doing great. So I guess my question is, can you still get everything you want doing this approach? Because I feel like it's such an American ethos that like I have to basically almost kill myself to get what I want.
Yeah, you can have a happy, fulfilled, abundant life being chill, Ju- a lot more easily, and you can force things to happen in life, but there's always a cost, and the cost is often a lot more than the reward. But when you're open to the way life is, you naturally flow in the direction it's already going in, and th- there's this. You feel often without trying to make it happen. You feel grateful because life tends to give you abundance
Hmm.
if you're not fighting with it. It tends to support wonderful relationships when you're not fighting with people. It tends to support better health when you're more relaxed and open, and you also take care of your body better because you're not fighting with it. So it doesn't have to be either or,
Yeah.
it's and. And so that was a long way of saying, yes, you still get goals. In fact, in January, I'm going to be leading a course just on how to apply the Sedona method to goals.
That's
Uh,
great.
and it's very powerful. There are many, many successful people who have used it to gain tremendous wealth.
And to do that is just similar asking questions and just more maybe aligned with these goals. Is that similar?
Yes, yes. Part of what you do with working on goals is first you get the clarity of what your goals are. And by the way, a lot of this is taught in our basic program too. I'm just doing a course in January. The only reason I mention is not trying to sell it is
It's okay.
the as an example of that this work can be used in that. Our basic program, part of what it teaches you is first how to get clear about your goals are, and then how to let go of all the thoughts and feelings and beliefs and ideas and memories to the contrary. And you can let go enough so that you can feel okay whether or not you get the goal, and then you discover that it's much easier to get the goal that way. And then we also show you that getting into action is really important. But if you release all the conflicting thoughts and feelings and beliefs about the action steps, that is often the biggest thing about helping you then get into conscious, effective action. So yeah, it's definitely effective for goals.
When was the last time you were stressed out? 1977?
No, there was recently my wife had a health challenge, and it was an extreme one, and there was definitely emotion coming up, but there was also this sense of calmness and openness and allowing for to find solutions. And I was her caregiver, right? And it instead of being an awful trauma, it was just what's happening. And I was also able to just be much more effective at helping her.
Mm.
So, but it didn't mean there was no stress. It's just it didn't stick because it wasn't mine.
So what would you say to somebody who's like in this moment experiencing extreme stress?
Well, let's before we end, since we've been going
Yeah.
for a while. I know you have a time limit. I was going to do this earlier, but we kind of went on to other things.
Great.
Let me take people through just this very first step, this a simple process that people can use on their own to keep using it. So you can do this with eyes open or eyes closed. It doesn't matter. I'm going to ask a series of questions to everyone. You don't need to respond. You can just see what happens for you. And so allow yourself to think of something in your life you'd like to change or improve. It could be something with your body, your mind, health, well-being, wellness, uh, uh, money, relationships, politics. It doesn't really matter. And then could you just welcome or allow or notice whatever thoughts or feelings that brings up inside? Is that welcomed or allowed? Are those thoughts or feelings what's apparently happening? And then, as best you can, just for now, could you let that go? Just could you? Would you? When? Now, it doesn't matter how you answered any of the questions, just pondering those questions, you'll find an ease developing inside of you and things bubbling up and letting go. And uh, and just the only thing that helps is be as open as you can to it being easy and lead with your heart as best you can. Well, but you don't have to cut off your head. uh, and be open to positive, supportive change. And so let's run through it again, just so people have a better sense of it. So focus on that same thing or anything else that you'd like to change or improve in your life. Doesn't matter what it is. And then could you welcome or allow or notice how how you're thinking or feeling about it? And then as best you can, just for now, could you let that go? Just could you? Would you? When? Good. So you'll find that if you're open to this, you keep asking the questions until you get the amount of relief that you want. And don't be fooled by how simple they are. As I mentioned, this is the only piece of the Sedona Method that Jack had me teach in his seminars. And now he teaches it in his seminars too. but it produces profound results, and it's something you can do in just a minute.
Mm. Can you narrate all of our lives? I felt so calm. I was like, okay, this has gotta be something I do all the time.
Right. Well, but I wouldn't want to compete with your narrator. Most of us have a narrator who's not always sympathetic.
No, not at all.
And interesting about you mentioned the narrator. One of the things that happens as you let go it is, well, two things. One is the narrator talks less.
Mm.
There's just life more and more of the time, a spontaneous living where you're just responding to life without having to overthink it and second guess it. And the other is it just naturally is more supportive. The thoughts become more encouraging, more positive, more open, more inquisitive, more about solutions as opposed to problems. And again, you don't have to force that to happen. It happens spontaneously and naturally as there's a letting go.
Mm. This was awesome. Okay, I love this so much. The last question I ask everybody is if you could tell people one thing to tell themselves all day long, what would it be?
One thing. This, whatever is apparently happening, is an invitation to happiness,
Mm.
is an invitation to abundance, is an invitation to just being who or what you are. And you can naturally let go of whatever appears to be standing in the way.
Okay, good answer. We've never had that. That was incredible. Well, I had so much fun. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and your book? It's amazing.
Sure. The book is called The Sedona Method, Your Key to Lasting Happiness, Success, Peace, and Emotional Well-Being. It's available wherever books are sold, including, of course, on Amazon. And if you want to find out more about our work, you can go to sedona.com, just like the city, Sedona.com. And there's lots of free material, and there's also information about what we do. And then on Facebook, on YouTube, uh, there's the Sedona Method. You can look that up on Facebook or YouTube. And there are, as you mentioned earlier, you watch some YouTube. There's hundreds of YouTube videos that teach various aspects of the Sedona Method on YouTube. There are also videos on Facebook, and there are quotes from me and Lester, new ones every day on the Sedona Method page. So there's lots of free resources.
If not, Hal will just come to your house. So thank you so much. Just kidding. This was awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun.